Today's video is 3 photos with disturbing backstories. These range from a hidden identity, a lost memory, to an expedition gone wrong. We explore the meaning behind those photos and what led up to those final chilling moments. Hi, I'm Orikat and welcome to our channel. I deliver cases to you in the dramatisation format, so if that's something you enjoy, you'll be happy to know we upload twice a week. As always, my aim is to give a voice to the victims and remember them as they were. So with that, let us begin. Sharon Marshall was known to be a very bright and responsible teenager. A very pretty girl, she was popular in school with high ambitions. She dreamt of becoming an aerospace engineer. She was a high school valedictorian in Georgia, and this eventually led to her getting a scholarship to Georgia Tech. But Sharon Marshall wasn't real, and nothing about her life was real either. And consequently, she had been involved in a decades-long puzzle of kidnapping, murder, and stolen identities. A complex web of truths that would take investigators many years to solve. To start this story, we have to go back to 1975, when a man named Franklin Delano Floyd got married. He met a woman at the time, called Sandy Chapman, and when they eventually tied the knot, he used an alias on his marriage certificate. Brandon Williams was officially his name in this new relationship. Now, prior to marrying the man she knew as Brandon, Sandy actually had 4 children from a prior relationship, one of which was her eldest child, Suzanne Marie Savakis. Unfortunately, not too long after their marriage, Sandy was sent to jail for 30 days after writing a bad check. And without warning, when he was left alone with the kids, Floyd took off with all 4 of them. He didn't tell anyone where he was going, he simply vanished. Though he wasn't able to stay under the radar for too long with 4 kids. So he eventually dropped 2 of them off at a children's home and abandoned another one with social services. But he kept 5-year-old Suzanne and raised her under various names. As Suzanne grew older, their relationship began to take a much darker turn. Floyd began sexually abusing her, and then when she was of legal age, he got married to her. This created an awful, twisted scenario where she was forced to play both his daughter and his wife, known to her friends at the time as Sharon Marshall. Whilst maintaining fake names, Floyd forced Suzanne to work in the strip club so she could support them financially. He just controlled every aspect of her life. This control extended over her relationships down to her very movements. In 1989, at 19 years old, Suzanne gave birth to her son, Michael. Though Floyd was listed as the father on the birth certificate, later research would prove that he was in fact not the biological father. At the time, this enraged Floyd, but he was still able to keep an iron grip over her life, and now consequently her son. Up until this point, Suzanne had been known as Sharon to her high school friends. But soon after this, she was forced to live under the name of Tonya Hughes. And this was all on top of moving to a completely different area. And it was after this moment, this big move, and taking on the new name, that she just couldn't take it anymore. So she confided in her newly made friends about a plan she had been working on. This plan was to escape with Michael. She wanted to be out from under Floyd's thumb once and for all. For so long she had been terrified of the consequences of leaving, but now that she had a child to look after, she had no choice but to make a better life for herself. Unfortunately, Suzanne never got the chance to have this new start. In April 1990, only a year after she had given birth to her son, Suzanne was found badly beaten on the side of a highway going into Oklahoma City. She died 5 days later, at just 20 years old. Floyd denied any involvement in her death, but still the accusations followed him around like a shadow. With Suzanne gone, he disappeared with Michael, which would set off a search that would last for years. 4 years later, in 1994, Floyd was arrested for kidnapping a woman at gunpoint. But when he was taken in and the police eventually made the connection about who he was, one of the most alarming things to them was that Michael was nowhere to be found. For years after, Floyd kept giving conflicting stories about the boy's whereabouts. Sometimes he claimed that Michael was alive and well and living with friends, and other times he simply just said he had lost the boy and didn't know where he had gone. Tragically, the truth wouldn't emerge for another 20 years until Floyd eventually confessed to FBI agents. He admitted that he had in fact killed Michael in 1994, shortly before he kidnapped that woman. He said the boy's final resting place was on the same interstate highway where Suzanne's badly beaten body had been found. Michael had been shot twice in the back of the head, only 6 years old at the time of his death. The case of Franklin Delano Floyd and Suzanne Savakis was given the moniker "the girl in the picture." This came from the awful image that was unearthed, which showed Floyd and Suzanne posing in the photo as father and daughter. Floyd is a depraved individual that not only committed murder, but stole and ruined entire lives. He erased Suzanne's identity and robbed her of a childhood before eventually ending her life and her son's life. Floyd remains on death row in Florida for other crimes, but the full extent of his actions may never be known. Today, Suzanne's surviving siblings and her biological mother still have to come to terms with the devastating impact of her disappearance and death. Their story has been documented in true crime series, including Netflix's own The Girl in the Picture. But no documentary can capture the full measure of the lives shattered by one man's obsession and cruelty. Here is the eerie photo of Floyd and Suzanne. In the textile town of Colne, Lancashire, Wallace Henry Hartley was born. Colne was filled with sturdy stone houses and lush countryside. The market town sat proudly between the forests of Pendle and Trawden, with brooding hills overlooking its Victorian-style streets. But despite the allure of Colne, it actually already had some pretty disturbing history, regardless of its small size. Most notably, the notorious witch trials of 1612. 12 individuals were accused at the time, in which all but one were tried on the 18th and the 19th of August. Of the 11 people that went to trial, 9 women and 2 men, 10 were found guilty and 1 was not. The 10 were executed and they were hung from a tree on Pendle Hill. So back to Wallace Hartley. He was the son of a church choir master, which basically meant that music was in his blood. And eventually he became known as someone who could craft the most loveliest and haunting melodies. And because of his reputation, he was consequently offered the job to be a bandmaster on the Titanic. Now, the Titanic at the time was the largest passenger ship in the world. It was 28 metres wide and 53 metres tall, and had a capacity of around 2,400 passengers. So this really was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for Wallace, but he was conflicted about it. Taking the job on the ship would mean that he was going away for a while. Hence, he was hesitant to accept the position. You see, he had a fiancée waiting for him, and she was called Maria Robinson. She lived in Boston Spa, Yorkshire. Wallace didn't want to go all that time without seeing her, but after they talked about it in length, they both decided Wallace could not miss the opportunity. So the week before he was due to board, in 1912, Wallace spent all the time he could possibly have spared with Maria. They did everything they loved to take Wallace's mind off the impending trip, because the whole thing was making him really nervous. But eventually, the time came, and 33-year-old Wallace boarded the Titanic and waved goodbye to Maria as it set sail. During his time on the ship, Wallace played some beautiful music, most notably with his preferred instrument, the violin. And as the whole experience went on, he found it was silly to have been so nervous because he was really enjoying it. I mean, music was his passion, and he was getting to play it in front of adoring patrons in the first class lounge. But around 11:40 p.m, on the 14th of April 1912, tragedy struck. The marvellous vessel of the Titanic hit an iceberg when it was en route to New York. The collision ruptured at least 5 of the ship's hull compartments, causing icy cold water to flood the ship. At the time, most passengers were in bed and only felt a small vibration. But around half an hour later, at 12:15 a.m, stewards started ordering the passengers to get up. The stewards told them all to put their life belts on, but unfortunately, a lot of the passengers at the time took this as a joke. But by 12:45 a.m, rockets were shot up into the air, and this time, the more seasoned travellers on the ship were starting to realise what the actual emergency was. What happened during the final 2 hours of the Titanic would become the stuff of maritime legend. As cold water rushed into the ship's bows and panic spread across the deck, by 2 a.m, all the lifeboats had been lowered. Unless someone was going to be making a break for it by jumping over the side, the window of safe passage was gone. Now on the Titanic, there were 2 bands. One was a trio who played in the reception area and outside the cafe and the restaurant, whereas Wallace Hartley headed a quintet that played after dinner and during religious services. The job of the musicians on board was to give the passengers a relaxing time, and even as their world came crashing down around them, it was no exception. On the orders of the ship's captain, the band set up, even whilst the ship continued to sink. They didn't have to do this, yet they wanted to keep the passengers calm and comforted in their final moments. Led by Wallace Hartley, the combined 8-man band originally played Alexander's Ragtime, but as their impending fates drew closer, the haunting melody of Nearer My God to Thee would drift out across the freezing Atlantic waters, all the way to the final notes. Around 2:20 a.m, the passengers who survived distinctively remember singing to the songs as they floated away on the lifeboats. But as for Wallace Hartley and the other brave musicians, they unfortunately sank with the ship, and this moment would forever be immortalised and known as one of the noblest examples of heroism at sea. 10 days after the sinking, the recovery ships found Wallace's body. He was discovered fully dressed, with his music case still strapped to his body. But a detail that would spark decades of speculation was that his trusty violin was gone from his person. For nearly a century, the whereabouts of Wallace's violin was unknown. Then, in a mysterious twist, it surfaced in an attic in Yorkshire in 2006. The instrument was still in its leather case with Wallace's initials on, and had survived against all the odds. After extensive forensic testing, the violin was sold at an auction for $1.6 million. It became one of the most valuable pieces of Titanic memorabilia ever sold. Wallace's body was returned to his hometown, where thousands lined the streets for his funeral procession and to celebrate his innate bravery. Today, a statue stands in Colne, commemorating this fearless man. The case of Wallace Hartley isn't just a tragedy, but a testament to the power of music in the face of death. Here is the photo of Wallace Hartley's auctioned violin. On the 8th of June 1924, two figures move against the white vastness of Mount Everest's north face. George Mallory, 37 years old, and Sandy Irvine, a 22-year-old student from Oxford. They were last seen 800 feet from the summit before disappearing into the clouds. They would never return, launching one of mountaineering's greatest mysteries. And a certain question always haunted future adventurers. Did they make it to the top? The little facts people did know were haunting enough. The day Mallory and Irvine disappeared, the weather was deteriorating fast. Their teammate, Noel Odell, had spotted the pair still moving upwards at around 28,000 feet. Inside their tent, Odell found hardware from oxygen apparatus thrown about, and evidence of Irvine working frantically to adjust their life-supporting oxygen systems before their final push to the summit. For 75 years, the mountain kept its secrets. Then in 1999, an American mountaineer known as Comrade Anker made a shocking discovery. Mallory's body was found frozen in the rubble at 8,000 feet. His leg was broken and his head bore several traumatic injuries. The body showed telltale signs of a catastrophic fall. The corpse, preserved by extreme cold, laid face down in the snow, fully extending and pointing uphill, almost as if Mallory was reaching for something just before his death. But with the remains of George Mallory found, where was Sandy Irvine? Investigators naturally examined Mallory's body a lot closer. Deep rope marks around his waist suggested to the investigators that he had been tied to his partner when he fell. So the evidence pointed to a joined fate, but still Irvine's body was just nowhere to be found. Yet the most tantalising clue didn't lie with the bodies. Instead, it was with a single piece of equipment: a Kodak vest pocket camera. Irvine was believed to have been carrying this camera during their final moments. If that little camera was found, all the answers would be solved. Yet the plot thickened when rumours surfaced that early Chinese expeditions had recovered the camera, though these claims were unverified. Then, in late 2023, a breakthrough occurred. A National Geographic team discovered human remains that could potentially be Sandy Irvine. Over 100 years later, they had found a foot, still intact, with the sock and boot on, and the initials on the sock were A.C. Irvine. So of course it couldn't be confirmed that these were actual remains belonging to Sandy, because those technically weren't his initials. Yet it is widely believed, because of the same surname, it has to be. The foot was found at least 7,000 feet lower than where George Mallory's body was found. The case remains open, but recent scientific studies suggest a sudden drop in atmospheric pressure, matching the deadly 1996 storm that claimed 8 lives, might have sealed Mallory and Irvine's fates. Even now, Mallory's last written words seem prophetic. The candle is burning down now, and I must stop. The mystery of Mallory and Irvine continues to captivate us, not just because it is an unsolved mystery, but because of what it represents. If Mallory and Irvine did make it to the summit, they would have been the first to do so. Nearly 30 years before the verified achievement of Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay. But it is chilling to think that somewhere on Mount Everest, that Kodak camera may still be waiting to be found. The company has confirmed that if it is found and treated carefully, the photos on it may still be able to be obtained. And if someone was to discover it, then one of mountaineering's biggest questions and consequently mystery would be solved. Here's the final photo of Mallory and Irvine mere hours before they disappeared on their final trip to the summit. Thank you for watching. Comment down below what you thought was the most disturbing photo.